So welcome everybody. So excited to have you here to FJH, what? Advising international students in U.S. high schools.
Well, hello everyone. We're going to go ahead and introduce the people that will be presenting today. And so my name is Arlene Outerbridge, and I am the Director of Guidance in International Recruitment at the Masters Academy. We are located in Oviedo, Florida, and I've been in guidance in college counseling for the last 16 years. And I do the dual role of not only managing our guidance in college counseling, but also managing our international recruitment, which is not your norm, but our school has thought that it is a good idea to do that. So I'm actually heading up both of those. So I look forward to connecting with you all and just learning from each other today. So welcome everyone.
Hi everybody, welcome. My name is Lauren Sefton. I'm Senior Associate Director of Admission of Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee. And I have been working with international recruitment since 2008 and have recruited mostly in Asia and Central and South America, but have worked with students from all over the world. And about 10% of Rhodes population now is international, which is really exciting because it was about 3 or 4%. When I first started working in admissions. So I'm excited to see some growth over time and get to work with you this morning.
And I'm Anna Wright. I'm the Director of College Counseling at the Benjamin School in lovely Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. So it does look like it's about to rain and hail here. I have been here at the Benjamin School for 4 years, but before that I spent 15 years working with international students in the UK outside of London. So we have a few international students at the Benjamin School, but I have that 15 years of experience of working with international students overseas. And I'm looking forward to talking to all of you.
All right, so we only have a quick 45 minutes to spend some time with you. And we're gonna start off by doing a quick poll in just a minute to find out who you are and what's on your mind. We'll talk about the landscape of international students in the US so that we've got the big picture of where things are. And then we'll really dig into the details of creating a supportive school culture using examples from both Anna and Arlene's schools. We'll cover some information about testing and advising international students on all sorts of testing questions. And then we will tell you where you may be able to find some financial aid and answer some questions about financial aid for international students. So moving along.
If we can have the first poll. Can you guys see the poll? Aha, there it is. Okay. So we just want to know a little bit about who our audience is, just so we can tailor it. So what is your professional role? How do you work with international students, or what brings you to this session? And then what is your level of experience, just so we can respond to that. Do we think, I think we've got 81%. So there it is. So most of you are secondary school counselors. Some of you are on the admission side, so probably wondering what we're doing down here on the secondary schools, or what kind of advice we need. And then most of you have worked with a few international students. You know, they're not the majority of your school, but there are enough of them that you know that you kind of have to think outside the box for them. That's really great. All right, if we could go now to the second poll. So if we could have poll number 2. Aha, here we go. And we just wanted to ask you a couple of questions about things that we don't have on our agenda, but we can fairly quickly shift to if these are things that you are interested in learning more about. We can include these in our discussions. More time. Perfect. I think we've got 78. So I think working with agents is always an interesting question, and how to kind of find a happy medium with that. College recruitment in high schools, in U.S. high schools, and how that works. Translation services, and then questions. So we'll try to see if we can loop back to some of those along the way. I will be keeping an eye on the questions and answers. If you have some burning questions as we go through, please feel free to put them up there, and we'll try to loop back at the end and come back to you. Great.
Excellent. All right. So really quickly, we know that you start talking about visas, it feels like an alphabet soup and can get confusing. The most common visa type that we are all probably working with is an F1 student visa, and that is the true student visa. That is someone from overseas that is coming over to study in school. Many of you on the high school side will see both F1s and J1s, an exchange student visa as well. So those are the two that are probably most common. H4s and L2s are dependents or children of someone that's already here on a work visa. So you may see those as well. These all count as international students. So these are probably the most common visa types that you're going to see. And these, again, all count as international students. For this session's purposes, we are not talking about undocumented students. So students that are from another country but are here without a visa and would be attending college without a visa. Some of the information we talk about today probably will still apply, but not necessarily all of it. So we're really focused on the student that is here in the US or coming to the US on a visa, most often a student visa or the child of someone else here on a visa. So thinking about that alphabet soup, in fall of 2019, more than 2,500 high schools across the US enrolled almost 70,000 international students. And that number represents actually a 6% decline in the number of students from the previous year, and a 15% decline from the height of international secondary student enrollment in 2016. So you can see it's decreased a little bit. And then certainly once 2020 numbers with COVID are available to us, I think you're going to see a totally different picture, but we're all hopeful that we'll start maybe seeing a slight increase as we move forward into the future. But these are J1 exchange students and F1 students as well. So students that are fully enrolled for high school to be graduating from high school in the US, and J1 exchange students who are here for just a year. Overall, these students, this particular graph that you see with the map is all international students, high school and college, all international students that are coming to the US. So you can see a big percentage from China and India. If we break it down and just look at international students studying at high schools, for high school students, China, Germany, and South Korea are the top 3 countries that are sending international secondary students to the US. If you look at F1 high school visa holders, 66% of them are from China, Vietnam, and South Korea. If you look at exchange students on that J1 visa, Europe is the most popular home for those students. It's Germany, Spain, and Italy make up 44% of J1 visa holders that are studying in US high schools. So I suspect in a lot of your own high school campuses, you're seeing a lot, again, from Europe, China, probably Vietnam, Germany as well. And where are they going? Taking a look at the SACEC lens, SACEC, the southern region is pretty stable. So more than 1/3 of F1 students are enrolled at schools in the Northeast, while J1 students are more concentrated in the Midwest. So student numbers in the South and the West tend to be relatively even. F1 students, again, that student visa, are limited to enrolling at public schools for only 1 year. And they're required to pay tuition. So a lot of times F1 students are more likely to enroll at private schools. J1 students on the exchange visa are typically enrolling at public schools, and they usually live with US host families. So that may account for some of the cultural norms of kind of where students end up as they're thinking about where they're going to study as well.
Lauren, we had a question come in, and we may answer it later. It says, if a student is planning to attend college in the US, is an F1 or an L2 visa better for admissions, for scholarships? Is there one that's better?
That is a great question. So most typically you're going to see students on an F1 visa, and that does allow them to have a work study job on campus. But certainly a student can remain on an H4 or an L2 visa and still study at college and university in the US. The only potential challenge is if their parent were to lose their visa status, the student would also lose their visa status and then would have to go through the hoops of applying for an F1 student visa, leaving the country, applying for an F1 student visa, and then returning to college on that student visa. So certainly either one is fine. I feel like anecdotally, most of our H4 and L2 students just remain on that L2 or H4 visa while they're here in college. But the only challenge would be if a parent then loses their visa status. Their child's status is dependent on their parent. Great question. All right, I'm passing it over to Arlene.
Okay, so as we think about the landscape of international students, specifically in the US, we've looked at some data already that Lauren just shared with us, but it is important to kind of think about some things in light of COVID. And I think this graph shows particular information that is for students thinking about pursuing education at the higher level. So this is not specifically for high school. I did some research afterwards that indicated that some of these percentages are mimicking within our high schools. And if you have some data that may, or information for your particular schools that may differ with this, we'd love to hear it. But I think it's interesting to note that because of COVID, the questions that were asked from this was, as a result of COVID, how likely are you to consider the following situations, which was postponing their enrollment, studying in their home country, studying internationally in a country other than the US, and not pursuing higher education at this time. I think the unlikelies in this was something that was interesting, because if 64% of them are choosing not to study in their home country, but 63% are deciding to study internationally in a country other than the US, I think that those correlations of those two graphs is saying something about where students are going. And I know personally from our perspective, some of the countries that we are dealing with students choosing to go over the US is in Canada. And that is something that this may be indicative of. I think it's quite interesting that, they say that it's unlikely that they're not going to pursue higher education at this time. I think some of them are in this wait and see situation of what way is COVID going to go specifically in the US and in those other countries that they're thinking about. And so, as I said before, I think a lot of this is indicative of our high school numbers as well. And so if you see anything different or want to share something in the chat, that would be great. But just wanted to share this piece of data with you so that you kind of see where the landscape is from the perspective of the mindset of the student and families at this point in the international realm. We're going to go ahead and go to, as we think about COVID specifically, but Anna and I are going to talk about our creating this supportive culture or continuing a supportive culture at our schools. And so I'm going to speak from the perspective of what we're doing currently for our students in the midst of COVID. And so one of the things that we have at our school is we provide individualized English and subject support to our students. And we have teachers that are geared towards specifically international students. So it's not just an ELL teacher, but these instructors are able to handle the questions from international perspectives. And so they've been doing work with our students one-on-one through Zoom and through WeChat, through different various programs and platforms to be able to help them through the process. And what we're seeing is that a lot of this is necessary because the students are, through our school specifically, are taking synchronous learning. And so if you think about students who are in a country like China, say for instance, them being a 12 or 13-hour time difference, depending on where we're at, they're literally in school when we're sleeping. They're in school when they should be sleeping. And so that we thought that it was necessary to kind of create that support for them. Other than that, you know, I'm going to just jump down and skip over that comprehensive 2-week program. That's something that we do with our students at the beginning. But what we've noticed is obviously across the board for those of you in high schools who are using the ability to do blended learning and to be able to do remote learning, you're seeing some of the same things that I'm going to talk about, which is that there's this disconnection, even with our day students. And so what we've done is we've created these small group meetings that are weekly. And so we get together with the students and just kind of talk to them about what's going on. And it doesn't have to be academic all the time. And actually, most of the time it's not. It's just to see where they're at and how they're coping. I think some of them missing some of the key things that are happening on campus creates this kind of yearning to be on campus and feeling like they're left out. So I think this is allowing them to be able to be a part of some of the things that we do. So we are incorporating some of our on-campus activities and creating ways for remote students to be able to be involved in that process as much as we can without them actually being on campus. And then we're also providing them the opportunities to be a part of leadership. And so we actually have what's on our campus, what's called an international society. And it is a program that was created 7-8 years ago that really integrates the international students with our local students and making sure that we can allow them to be able to connect with one another and to create friendships and understand each other's cultures. And so we've given them the opportunity, obviously, to be able to have leadership opportunities through that. And right now we have, I think, 3 of our officers are remote learners that are international students that are in their home countries. But it's kind of neat to be able to see them be able to participate in some of those things. And then obviously from our office, we're including them in small group meetings with college counseling and college visits and creating some alternatives with some of the schools and universities that they're interested in, and speaking with some of those college reps, making sure that they can do some of those visits that are timely for those students. And so that's been helpful as well. And so we are a school that is a homestay family school, so we don't have a dorm on our campus. And so we also have some of our students that are on campus that are international students. The support that we give to those host families is also something that has been important, and also their home families back home, making sure that we're staying connected with them. And so we're doing that through fun ideas and, you know, celebrating their birthdays and being able to just do some of those personal things that they might be missing out on. And so we believe, and I'm sure all of you believe the same thing, because that's why we're here, that's why we do what we do. And so I give kudos to you for all the hard work that you've been doing with your students. But if you have specific questions about some of the actual programming that we do on our campus, I'm happy to share that with you and to provide anything that you think would be helpful for you in this process.
I'm muted, sorry. The Benjamin School, when I first arrived here, had a number of international students. They were homestay students, and we had a specific recruitment agent who brought students to our school, hooked them up with host families. And we decided, I think 2 years ago, to end that relationship with that specific person. We're probably starting to look for a new person or a new agency, and then COVID happened. So right now we don't have a large number of international students. Most of the students that we have, they're here, they live locally, and their parents are here on visas. And we do have a few students who came to us after Hurricane Dorian from the Bahamas. So we are in Florida, we're one of the closest land points for them. And so they've actually been able to live in the Bahamas and go to school, which has kind of been the best of both worlds for those students. But some of them are international students. So what I'm talking about is if we bring international students back to campus, I think we all recognize that we needed to make some changes about how we worked with these students and what went wrong, and not wrong the first time, but like what we could do better, and what we could do, because I think a lot of the students came and assimilated during the day, and then we want to make sure that we have a better support program for them. So one of the things would be to have a separate orientation program, very much like Arlene does, that helps them understand American culture, their host family relationships, what the academic expectations are, what might be different about going to an American high school than what they're used to, helping them create some friendship bonds, not only with the other international students, but with other, some students who they might be partnered with and from our leadership team. And then, hope that as the students mature through that program, that they take on more of a leadership role with that. I think we also need to do some training with our faculty about what the differences or the cultural differences that some of these students may come with, why they may act a certain way or behave a certain way. Just recognizing most of our students in the past were Chinese when there were particular holidays, right? When these students might be more homesick or when they might need more attention at certain times. I think that we need to do a better job, or we could do a better job about really kind of looking at course selections and making sure that these students are put in the right courses. When does it make sense for these students to repeat a grade? We do not have ESL support at our school, so they really have to be mainstream. Understanding that, for example, if they come from a school with an integrated math system, that taking algebra 2 and geometry looks very different, is very different if you come from a different system. And then to have a team of administrators and teachers and personals to regularly check in with the students. How are they doing socially, emotionally, and to kind of evaluate their academic progress, but then also to check in with them, with their host families. We do have this year some remote students who, as Arlene suggested, are doing this. We do not offer asynchronous teaching, so they are up at all hours. Checking in from home, so their life schedule must be different, and we all know that to take the AP exams, they'll be taking them at 2 a.m. and other hours. So we have our advisors checking in with them and their teachers checking in, but I think to really make that deliberate, to go out of the way to really check in on how they're doing and to make sure that they feel some attachment to it. Now, next year, our plan is to not have remote students. So again, getting these students back into our community and welcoming them back in will be important too. And then to have these students have some affinity times, or where they can be with other students if they want to, but then to also make sure that they're making connections with students from all the different cultures, and then to have liaisons with the host families, so the host families feel connected to the school, and the students also know that that's an open line of communication, because I think we found that the students didn't feel like they could complain to their parents about what was going on in the host families, but they also didn't feel like they could come to the school. And I think just making sure that those lines of communication are open and that we're all working together to make this the best experience for the students as possible would be great. So that's where I think if we go back to taking more international students, those are some programs that, we would like to work to put into place. So. All right, and I'm gonna go straight into testing. I'm sorry, I'm not paying attention. So as you may know, our international students often have to take different tests to prove their English proficiency. And I certainly know that when I started back in the eons, it really was TOEFL. TOEFL was the only game in town. They went and took the TOEFL. I remember when it was a paper-based test. So we wanted to talk about some of the different tests that they can take. Now, there are some universities that will let students waive TOEFL and English proficiency if they have a certain SAT score. So you may find that you have or ACT score. You may find that international students still need to test if they don't want to take the TOEFL or the IELTS or the other tests to have that proficiency, or they may have to prove that they were taught in English for a certain number of years. So that's certainly been the case with some of our students. Just kind of a high level differences between the different tests. TOEFL costs about $225 to $300. It does change by location, but I think I looked domestically and that's pretty consistent. It was around $250. They have 50 test dates a year. So most weekends they will have test dates. It takes about 4 hours to take the test. So it's a long test. It's like the SAT or the ACT. They do have a 10-minute break along the way. The great thing about TOEFL is that it's widely recognized. You know, it sort of is well known around the world. It tests them in all the basic, you know, English, reading, writing, speaking skills. It is based mostly on US English. So if you have students who are coming from, you know, they've been taught mostly British English, they might find that there are some differences there. It's scaled on a scale of 1 to 20, and it's mostly a multiple choice test. Students have to travel to a test center. They have to plan in advance to get the test. The test centers, depending on how many seats are in the area are available, they may have to plan ahead. It's mostly a computer-based test. The students go to a center and get on a computer and take the test. And the students will respond to the computer and record their answers using a microphone. And they get their test results about 10 days later. The first 4 results to send to colleges are free, and then it costs about $19. So it's an expensive test. Students have to travel. Certainly, if you have students in other countries right now, it can be hard to find test centers in other locations around the world. So that has been some of the challenges with TOEFL right now.
Well, and if Anna, I can just add really quickly, TOEFL did create a home edition with
Right.
COVID, which a lot of colleges and universities accepted this year. It's always good to check with each college or university, have the student check with each college or university if they accept that TOEFL home edition and if they will be accepting it in subsequent years.
And they plan to have a new, I believe a new version is coming out, which I believe is going to be both shorter and cheaper. And it's responding to some of that need to do this stuff. So they are in the mix of releasing a new test, which I believe will be a home version, was certainly kind of mix some of those points. Now, when I worked in the UK, IELTS was the main test that we took because this was a test that students needed to get UK visa. So if you have students who are applying to multiple countries, it might be worth looking at what the English test, for example, if you have students who are looking at Canada, right, they may be more familiar with IELTS than, which is run by the British Council, than they are with TOEFL. The UK, many of the UK universities can kind of verify the proficiency of students on their own, but some of them do need an IELTS test to give the student a student visa. So we had a lot more students take IELTS in the UK simply because we didn't want them to test twice. It's about 48 test dates a year. It's a slightly shorter test, but then they do also do a separate speaking section. Now, most students will do it on the same day, but they can do it on a completely different day at a completely different time. And that's where they actually sit down with the person and they speak back and forth and respond to a live person. It is more based on British English, so you might see a little bit more of that. It has more variety of questions than TOEFL does. It has both a paper and a computer version. And there's an academic and a general version of IELTS, and students who are planning to go to university usually take the academic version. Again, students have to go to a test center. So for example, I looked at Florida and there were over 20 TOEFL centers. The closest one to us was about 45 minutes away. There were only 2 IELTS centers. And so it was a considerable more distance for a student to go to. And so if a student really needed to take the IELTS test, it would definitely took some more coordination on our part. And the result was, again, about 13 days later, and the first tests are free, but then after those first 5 tests, they do have to pay a fee to have their test scores sent on to their universities. So, and then the new game in town is Duolingo, and they're really kind of shaking everything up. And if you don't know about Duolingo, I would encourage you to look at it. They have definitely skyrocketed in sort of acceptance by universities and by students using them during COVID. COVID kind of hit them at a sweet spot, and they have exploded. And I think one of the things I really like about Duolingo is that they've worked really hard to build relationships with universities. So it's not just selling this to the students and answering the students' needs, but it's specifically working with universities so that they can meet those needs as well. And it was, their founder was basically an international student who couldn't get to a TOEFL center. And so he's also a computer genius. And so he created Duolingo, which many of you know as a learning an alternative language program, but used it also as an English speaking test. So the beauty of Duolingo is it costs $49, so significantly cheaper. And they do have waivers. So if you have students who cannot pay for it, they will work with you. The test can be taken anywhere that a student can have a well-lit room on their own with a computer with internet. So they can take it in their house, they can take it in your school. The student needs to be alone in the room, and they do need to have, again, those computer skills. The other nice thing about Duolingo is that it takes about an hour. So it's much shorter because it's a dynamic test. As the student answers questions, the test responds to them. And so it will either feed them harder questions or easier questions as they go along. It is being accepted by over 3,000 universities, and they have an active list on their website. And even if the university doesn't take it as a sole English test, sometimes they'll take it as a supplement, another test to kind of, you have a student who maybe waives the TOEFL scores because they have strong enough ACT or SATs, they might take Duolingo just to kind of, again, nail down that English proficiency is well in place. It's kind of a nice add-on sometimes. A lot of students outside the United States have used it during COVID because they just haven't been able to get to test centers. Again, it has reading, writing, listening, speaking skills. It's a fully adaptive test, but it also is proctored asynchronously. Sorry, I'm not saying that correctly. But the student could take it at 3 in the morning if they wanted to. They can take it at whatever time zone, and then it is proctored later by a human. And Duolingo uses a lot of technology and AI to kind of track for human behaviors to make sure that the student is not looking off screen, not getting cues from other people, not looking things up, those sort of things. One of the nice things also is that if you're an admissions officer, when you get the student's scores, you also get a recording of the verbal parts of it. So you can literally, an admissions officer can listen and hear the student speak and hear the student respond to the questions. It's kind of a nice gut check along the way to see if the student is actually responding. Because it's a fairly new test, they don't have a lot of data of like the student with this score graduated with this at the end of university, but they have a lot of concordance data, which means that if a student has this TOEFL score, this IELTS score, then they should usually be in this range for Duolingo. So they spent a lot of their time building data as to how they compare to the other tests. The results come back in 2 days, so the students know fairly quickly, and there's no fee for sending it to college. This is really a tool that was meant to help our students with financial concerns, to be able to have easy and accessible access to this test so that it was not a barrier to them passing these tests. The one thing about Duolingo is that there are practice tests, but there aren't there isn't the machine of how do you prep for this test that there probably is for certainly TOEFL and maybe for IELTS. But they do have ways that students can take a practice test before they go in and take the real one. So that's sort of testing in a nutshell. And I encourage you to look at where your student is going and what they might need and whether they even need to test. But I certainly know in the past I've encouraged some students who perhaps needed testing, right? We're in Florida, so our students still need testing. But perhaps had weaker verbal scores. Like sometimes a score like this would help kind of prove that their English proficiency was well done and they could succeed in a university setting.
Great advice. Thank you, Anna, and good overview of the 3 most popular options. So if you reach under your office chair right now, you're going to find a bag of money. You are welcome. And if you thought that was going to be the case in this session and that dollars were just going to come flowing through your screen, you were sorely misled and sorry. So this financial aid is such a tricky situation. The good news is that funding is increasing for international students. The bad news is that really only 17% of US colleges and universities are giving aid to international students. And a lot of times that money is going to students from countries that are less represented. And it feels like for a lot of our international students in applicant pools, there are overrepresented countries applying to oversubscribed courses of study. How many of them are thinking engineering or business or biology and pre-med options. And they all want schools that they would consider to be internationally appealing locations, East Coast, West Coast. So those students, if I just described your students, your student populations, they are going to face fierce competition for that 17% university funding. So my advice, if you look at these little pinwheels, you can obviously see that private schools are going to be giving more money than public schools to international students as well. But it's still slim pickings. So I'm not here to tell you necessarily where you're going to find a whole lot of money, but I am here to arm you with some facts so that you at least know what we're all getting into. again, only 17% of US universities are providing funding for international students. Personal funds are still making up the majority of funding for college. This little bubble is a little bit of an old slide, but I couldn't find a new one and frankly didn't have time to make my own. For the 2019-2020 data, 83.9% of the funds came from personal and family funds. So actually a kind of a worse option. And US University is providing 9% of the funding for the 2019-2020 years. So still pretty similar. The primary source of funding is still leaning in on the family and personal funds. So how do international students apply for funding? They are not using the FAFSA. They do not complete the free application for federal student aid. Many colleges and universities will ask for the International Student Financial Aid Application, which is a PDF that's offered by the College Board. So it's a free tool. Students fill it out. It's literally a PDF. So they are typing or handwriting information and submitting a PDF to a college or university for calculation. Some schools, if they accept the CSS profile for domestic students, they will probably also accept the CSS profile for international students, or even if they don't ask for it for domestic US citizens, they may ask for it for international students. And the CSS profile is obviously filled out electronically. The benefit being that students can fill it out in their home currency, which is sometimes a little bit easier. And then there's a calculation of an expected family contribution through that. Many schools may have their own institutional financial aid application for international students. And then there's something called the certification of finances, which basically every international student that's applying for a visa, they're going to go for that F1 visa, they're going to have to show that certification of finances as part of their visa, their embassy interview for their visa. Some schools may ask for the certificate of finances at the time of application, and they may use that to help figure out financial aid packaging for a student. Others will only ask for it at the time of deposit. So honestly, the answer, like so many of college admission questions, are it depends, and every college may do it differently. My recommendation is for students to do their research and frankly to cast a wide net. I know there's some thought about, let's not apply to too many schools to make things crazy. For international students that are seeking financial aid, you need to cast a big, wide net because it is like winning the lottery to find some of these dollars. Jenny Kent and Jeff Levy of Personal College Admissions, so independent counselors, post a guide every year on their website of colleges who give financial aid to international students. I think this link is also linked possibly from the International ACAC website as well as one of their resources. And so you can see the website address at the bottom of this, but they do a whole spreadsheet of financial aid for non-resident alien undergraduates, for international students based on data, IPEDS data. And so that can be a source for you to kind of understand who's giving out more money, who's giving out less money. Again, it's a lot of average information, but it might help you kind of shuffle around some resources and figure out who might be a good place to start. So that is my best tip for trying to find the money, is to do some research and start with this spreadsheet to get an idea. So I think we have about 5 minutes left, knowing that the poll asked for there was some interest in some questions about working with agents. We could maybe start with that piece, yes?
Yes, so I wasn't sure exactly what kind of questions you may have specifically about agents. So if you have very specific questions in your, you would like to share with us, I'd be happy to answer those specifically. But again, I am presenting information based upon where we are today and the kind of relationships that we have with agents. We have some key agents that we work with. So we work with about 5 agents based on different countries that provide students connecting with us. And so in order to kind of maintain some of those relationships, I do a bi-weekly Zoom call with these agents and just kind of give them some student updates for students they may have on with us already, or just what's happening on our campus. Just giving them a quick snapshot of what's going on. And so that has been very helpful, because it not only keeps me and our school at the forefront of their mind, but it also keeps them updated as to what's going on. And so that if they think about a good fit for a student that they may have, that will also help with the recruitment side of things. But it also helps with making sure that if any of our students have needs, that the agents we work with are great liaisons with their home families back in their home country. So that's been a good experience for me, to be able to just communicate with those agents. And sometimes we'll do some email blasts with what's going on with some of the fun things that are happening on our campus. Sometimes I'll do that through WeChat or WhatsApp or some other platform that works with that country. So like we happened to have prom this year, which was a big deal for our seniors. It was just for our seniors, and some of our international students were a part of that. And so we sent pictures of things that were happening during that time. And so I think it's just helpful to be able to share with them. And then even the people that were not able to attend some of these events, they want to see some of those things that are happening. So even our students were able to see things from that's happening on our campus from their home country. Just recently, we've opened our campus a little bit to be able to have some of our agents that are local. So we have some liaisons that are within the state of Florida or within the US that have come by on our campus just to see how things are going. And we've hosted some of those, and to be able to kind of let them see how we're doing our protocols and our, making sure that they understand our safety and our COVID protocols and all that. And so that it's reinforced with them. And then, as I mentioned before, just doing some social media updates with pics from students all over the world, so that they can see how successful they're still being, though they're being remote, because of the resources that we're giving them here, and also the help that we're providing for them. So the bottom line really is just keeping the lines of communications open. I think a lot of what happens right now is that there's so much happening on our campuses that we're trying to keep up with. There's a lot that's going on that is so different from what we've done in the past. So our workload is very different, and sometimes even more. And so this could fall through the cracks. But what I'm saying is that it's super important to keep those lines of communications open, because in the long run, it'll pay off. Just to be able to have relationships forged and maintained, I think is super important. So that is currently what we're doing. If you have specific questions about other relationships with agents, you can go ahead and put a question in, and we'll see if we can answer that before we end here.
And Arlene, I think that's a great overview of how your school is working with agents to bring in more international students to your community. I know in yesterday's special interest group, there was also some questions about how do you counsel high school students that are working with agents kind of not related to your school, and there's like a push-pull in that relationship. And I wonder if maybe you can shed some advice on some best practices for that.
Yeah, I know Dan is probably hovering because we have like less than a minute, but I just want to say, like, I think set your own boundaries, understand what your boundaries are. Try to make sure that the student understands that they need to establish a relationship with you and with your school, and that you may have certain rules. So for example, I need to see drafts of their essays. I need to see that they are authors of those drafts of the essays. I need to be able to go through their applications with them. So even though they're working with somebody else, even somebody else may be helping them, I kind of set these are our expectations, and this is how I want to be. And I say, I'm going to advocate for you. So this is what I need to be able to say, to work with you on that. So, but I'm always happy to talk about it, because it can be difficult, especially if you cannot communicate to the agent directly because they don't speak English, or because they're, the parents don't speak English. Sometimes it can be a barrier as well.
I did see in the Q&A a great question about is the admission counselor your regional admission counselor or an international admission counselor when you're thinking about that? The answer is it depends. Every school is going to do it slightly differently. So that's worth asking your admission counselor, hey, is this student going to be read by you or by somebody else in your office that works specifically with international students. I will also say for my high school counselor friends, if you can help give us a heads up, give the college rep a heads up, hey, we've got a significant international student population, make sure you're well versed in international admission questions before you do a virtual visit or a high school visit. That can help, because as much as we all try to train everybody on those things, some of that information sticks and some of it doesn't.
I just saw Dan pull up his lovely head. He's got another session to prep. So anyways, thank you very much. Please feel, I think, free to reach out to any one of us and let us know if we can help answer your questions. If you have an interest in kind of being part of some groups for domestic counselors who are working with international students, we're trying to get that network built. So please reach out to me and we can get you included in further programming. Oh, you're muted, Arlene.
They also, there was just a thought of whether they could have access to this presentation. And I think this was recorded today and will then become a resource that people can have, but we should be able to have access to who joined our meeting today. And we'll be able to, if that's not the case, we'll be able to share this with you guys in the future. It was wonderful talking with everyone today, and really not being able to hear you communicate back to us is always the hard part, but we see who's on the line and grateful for you stopping by and hanging out with us. We appreciate it.
Good luck. Feel free to take a screenshot of the resources that are here, but have fun. Good luck. May all your international students be happy and settled.
Thank you. And thank you, Dan, for being patient with us.
All right, good job, you guys. I'm going to end the meeting because I got to jump onto another one. Thanks so much. You guys are great.
Bye-bye.
Bye.